My name is Kaylee and I have synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition in your brain that causes different sensations to be triggered by different sensory organs and different stimulus. So basically, the most common things are where you see colors for letters, shapes, numbers, sometimes your sound and taste and different senses will crisscross. So there's four main types. The main types are projector synesthesia. That is where you perceive colors for certain letters or numbers, shapes, etc. They are seen with your eyes on the object. That is projective synesthesia. Then there's association synesthesia, and that's when you see things in your mind's eye. That's how it works for me. From there, there's perceptual synesthesia, and that is when your senses cross, and it's kind of interesting because you might be able to hear the color blue or taste happiness. It's a strange sensation. Then conceptual synesthesia is when you perceive a concept that is abstract in a plane physically in your head. Sometimes you can see wave frequencies for different things. For example, when I smell or hear something, I might perceive it as a frequency. And this is actually part of something that is being studied, linking synesthesia to possibly being linked to psychic abilities, although it's not officially true or anything like that. There is a lot of evidence that supports that synesthetes have a lot of symptoms that are reported by people who do claim to have psychic abilities, where they're saying they always see vibes and different sensations for things. So a lot of times, like, I see vibrations and energies. So they're just being looked into at the time. Also, there's different symptoms that categorize synesthesia as being official. Synesthesia has to be involuntary. That means you have no control over it. Has to be projected or associated. It has to be durable. That means you're always going to have it. It doesn't come and go. You always have these sensations happening at all times. They're generic. All the sensations are generic. You're not going to see a waterfall because you smelled a pineapple. You're going to smell the pineapple and maybe see a blue rectangle and think, that blue rectangle reminds me of a waterfall. But that's not going to be your sensation. It's not going to be waterfall. Your sensation will be a blue rectangle. But you can have things that remind you of other things. That happens. But they have to be generic as the initial sensation. Otherwise, it's not synesthesia. So then, they have to be memorable. You're always going to remember it. So for example, my A's are always red, my B's are always blue, and I can remember it like that. If someone says, what color is A? Red. That's how it works. Always there. You can always bring it up. It's not like you have to think about it. They also have an emotional attachment, and you have emotions tied to things. So what kind of emotion is associated with B? B's are basic. They're kind of boring, and they're quiet, and they're shy. That's how a B is. Like, they're just different characteristics versus different things. A's are kind of those people who study really hard for a test and don't attain any knowledge, and then you ask them a question later because they have a 4.0 and they're like, I don't know. So they kind of have personalities, and that's a characteristic of synesthesia, is giving inanimate objects personalities. So a lot of traits that are related to synesthesia, most people with synesthesia usually have higher intelligence or a high IQ. My IQ is 133, which is considered a superior intelligence. It's not genius, but it's up there. Then there is expressing dyslexia. I definitely do have some dyslexia. Also ADHD, which is something I also have, is usually associated with synesthesia. Migraines and headaches, I used to get a lot of those when I was younger. Either being super ticklish or relatively numb. I'm a little bit more on the numb side. Sometimes being a perfectionist. I definitely can be when I want to. And artistic. A lot of synesthetes are very artistic and creative because they have such a different mindset. A lot of famous people have synesthesia. I think the most recent person to be officially diagnosed is Kanye West. And honestly, you can listen to some of his music and it sounds hideous. But to me, sometimes I will see the prettiest colors. I will be listening to auto-tuned crap and hear a beautiful rainbow. it's kind of like magic. I don't know how I feel about Kanye West, but he definitely has synesthesia. You could just tell by listening to it. So another thing is that confusing lefts and rights, although people with, especially if they have conceptual synesthesia, have a pretty good idea of where they are relative to other things, yet I can never figure out left and right. I still have to do this thing all the time. I'm always like, which way is left and right? So that's just a little bit about synesthesia. It is considered to be genetic. Usually relatives will have maybe a symptom or two, but they won't have it till the full extent. Usually about 40% of people with a full extent synesthesia have a relative that has at least one symptom of synesthesia. So it's very interesting. Women are also 8 times more likely to have it than men, and they're more common to be left-handed. I'm actually right-handed though, but it is more common to be left-handed. So it's still unknown exactly what causes synesthesia. It's jumped around from being considered part of schizophrenia to being neurological to being involved in neurotransmitters to not having neurotransmitters involved. It's also currently believed that it could just be a function of the brain and not a condition at all. That's my personal belief. I definitely think a lot of people have it to some extent. It used to be 1 in every 25,000 people had synesthesia, but that's usually to its full extent, and that statistic still stands for full extent of synesthesia. But expressing most traits, but not enough to categorize it, is 1 in every 300, and expressing at least 2 symptoms is 1 in every 20 people. So there's definitely a lot of synesthesia in the world that we just don't know about. Typically, you're going to find synesthesia in more creative people. Doesn't mean that they have to be creative if they have synesthesia. It's just how it is. So that's just a little bit more about synesthesia. I hope you learned a little bit about something. It's kind of annoying when I have to explain it all the time, and I'm always saying something weird and I have to explain why I said that. Sometimes I'm just like, just Google it. It's a lot of explaining to do. So it's just good that some more people know a little bit more about synesthesia.